A little beggar girl saved the millionaire with just one sentence: "You're being betrayed." When the millionaire heard those words, he decided to investigate and was completely shocked by what he discovered. The rain poured relentlessly over the bustling metropolis, turning the usually spotless sidewalks into mirrors that reflected the neon lights from the towering skyscrapers. Amid a sea of umbrellas and hurried footsteps, a small figure darted through the crowd, clutching a worn teddy bear tightly to her chest. 7-year-old Lucy, with her oversized coat and tangled hair, had mastered the art of becoming invisible when needed and visible when it mattered. The massive glass building at 1451 Happiness Street had become her favorite observation spot. Unlike the other corporate towers that seemed to pierce the clouds with their cold indifference, this building had character. Lucy had nicknamed it the Glass Sphere, though its real name, adorned in golden letters above the entrance, read Thompson Corp. From her usual corner across the street, Lucy watched the daily parade of suits and briefcases, creating stories for every person who entered or exited the building. There was the coffee lady, who always spilled a few drops on her way in, the late man, who seemed to be in a constant sprint, and her favorite kind eyes, the man who appeared on magazine covers but still helped people pick up dropped papers. But today was different. The rain had forced her to seek shelter closer to the building's entrance, and for the first time in her 3 weeks of observation, she could catch fragments of conversations that were usually lost in the city's symphony of car horns and construction noises. "The quarterly reports are ready for review, Mr. Harrison," announced a woman in a sharp blue suit, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she hurried after a man with graying temples. "Make sure they're on Thompson's desk before lunch," the man replied, his voice carrying a sharpness that made Lucy's keen instincts tingle. There was something in his tone that reminded her of the street vendors trying to sell fake watches, a hint of deceit wrapped in confidence. Lucy squeezed her teddy bear tighter, its worn fur providing the comfort she needed in moments of uncertainty. "Did you hear that, Mr. Whiskers?" she whispered to her constant companion. "He doesn't sound very nice." The bear, with its missing, iron-patched arm, had been her only confidant since the night everything changed. The night she promised her parents she would keep him safe forever. A security guard noticed her presence and began walking toward her. Lucy knew the routine. It was time to disappear again. But as she prepared to retreat into the rain, she caught a glimpse of him. Kind Eyes himself, Eric Thompson, CEO of Thompson Corp. He stepped out of his sleek black car, and unlike every other day when he was surrounded by an entourage, today he was alone. Something was different about him too. His usually confident stride seemed heavier, his shoulders slightly slumped. As he reached for the door, he dropped his phone, and the screen cracked against the wet curb. Lucy watched as he stared at the broken device, a defeated sigh escaping his lips. Without thinking, Lucy darted forward, picked up the phone, and handed it to him. Their eyes met, and for a moment the bustling street disappeared. Eric Thompson's kind eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "That was very kind of you." Before Lucy could respond, the security guard reached them. "Mr. Thompson, I was just about to remove this." "She helped me, Charles," Thompson interrupted, his tone firm but gentle. He turned back to Lucy, but she had already disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only the lingering impression of a small figure with a teddy bear. What Lucy didn't know, as she retreated to her hidden corner of the city, was that this brief encounter would set off a chain of events that would not only change her life, but also the fate of Thompson Corp. For in the coming days, her sharp eyes and keen mind would notice patterns that the sophisticated security systems and corporate protocols had completely missed. As the rain continued to fall, Lucy found shelter under a cafe awning and watched as more employees hurried into the Glass Sphere. Mr. Whiskers leaned against her knees as she observed Harrison, the man with the suspicious voice, meeting a woman in the lobby. Their heads were close together, their expressions serious. "Something's not right, Mr. Whiskers," Lucy murmured, her young mind already connecting dots that adults might dismiss. "Kind Eyes needs our help. He just doesn't know it yet." The following week brought unusually heavy rain to the city, forcing Lucy to get creative with her observation spots. She had discovered that the service entrance to the glass sphere had a small alcove that offered perfect shelter and, more importantly, a clear view of the employee parking lot. It was here that she began to notice things that seemed odd, even to her young mind. Harrison, whom she now called the suspicious man, had started arriving much earlier than everyone else. She saw him exchanging thick manila envelopes with people she had never seen before, people who never entered through the main entrance. These meetings always took place in the shadows of dawn, when even the security cameras seemed to be looking the other way. On a particularly wet morning, Lucy shared half of a found bagel with Mr. Whiskers when she overheard a conversation that nearly made her lose her breakfast. Two people stood just around the corner, their voices barely audible over the drumming rain. "The board meeting is in 3 weeks," said a woman's voice, one Lucy recognized as belonging to the coffee lady. "Thompson suspects nothing yet, but we need to hurry." "Emily, lower your voice," hissed Harrison. "Everything is going according to plan. By the time he realizes what's happening, it will be too late. The numbers are already being adjusted." Lucy held her breath and pressed herself further into the shadows. Mr. Whiskers' one eye glimmered in the faint light as she squeezed him tighter, her heart pounding. She might have been young, but she understood enough about adults to know when they were planning something bad. The conversation continued and fragments reached her ears. Offshore accounts, modified reports, unanimous decision. Each word felt more incomprehensible than the last, but the intent behind them was crystal clear. They were planning to harm Kind Eyes, to take something from him. As Lucy processed what she had heard, a memory surfaced, a time when her father had taught her about right and wrong. "Sometimes, sweetheart," he had said, "doing the right thing is scary, but that's what makes it brave." She touched the patch on Mr. Whiskers' arm and remembered how her mother had sewn it on the night before everything changed, promising that he would always protect her. Inside the glass sphere, life continued as usual. Michael Thompson sat in his office, reviewing documents that seemed blurry. Something felt off about the recent financial reports, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The numbers added up, but they didn't tell the story he expected. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Emily Rivera, his communications director, entered with her usual polished smile. "Mr. Thompson, the press release about the quarterly results is ready for your review." "Thank you, Emily," he replied, not noticing how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "How are the preparations for the board meeting coming along?" "Everything is on track," she assured smoothly. "But there have been some concerns about the company's new direction. Perhaps we should discuss them over dinner." Thompson politely declined, an instinct telling him to keep his distance. Lately, he had felt increasingly isolated within his own company, as if invisible walls were being built around him. Even his most trusted executives seemed to speak in codes and exchange glances he couldn't decipher. Outside, Lucy had made a decision. She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and a short pencil from her pocket, treasures she had found in an abandoned backpack. With Mr. Whiskers as her witness, she began to write down everything she had heard, her childish handwriting bearing the weight of corporate secrets. "We have to warn him," she whispered to her teddy bear. "But how? No one listens to little girls." "Like me." Mr. Whiskers stared back with his one eye, as if reminding her that Kind Eyes had listened when she returned his phone. Throughout the day, Lucy noticed more suspicious activities. A man in an expensive suit arrived in a car with foreign license plates, briefly met Harrison in the parking lot, and then left with yet another manila envelope. The security cameras in that area were suddenly turned away, just like during the morning meeting. Lucy added these details to her notes, creating a picture that would seem impossible for a 7-year-old, but her observations were sharper than any security audit. She knew she would have to act soon, but the weight of her discovery felt enormous. How could she, a little girl from the street, convince someone as important as Michael Thompson that he was surrounded by traitors? The answer came when she saw him leave the building that evening. Unlike other days when his car waited out front, Thompson walked out alone and headed toward the parking lot. Lucy clutched her notes and Mr. Whiskers, gathering all her courage. Sometimes, she realized, The bravest thing was also the simplest. Lucy's heart pounded in her chest as she watched Michael Thompson cross the parking lot. The evening shadows stretched long across the asphalt, and the persistent drizzle created a glimmer around the streetlights. It was now or never. She held tightly to Mr. Snuggles for courage and stepped out from her hiding spot. "Mr. Kindeyes," she called out with a trembling but determined voice. Thompson stopped and turned toward the unexpected sound. A flicker of recognition appeared on his face, the little girl with the teddy bear who had helped him with his phone. "You're in danger," continued Lucy, running toward him with her precious notes in her small hand. "They're trying to trick you, the suspicious man and the coffee lady. They're planning something bad." Security guards appeared almost immediately, trying to stop her. But Thompson raised his hand and halted them. There was something in the child's voice, a sense of urgency, a sincerity that caught his attention. He crouched down to her level, ignoring the wet pavement seeping into his expensive suit. "Slow down, little one," he said gently. "What's your name?" "Lucy," she replied, holding Mr. Snuggles closer. "And this is Mr. Snuggles. We've been keeping watch. The man named Harrison meets people in the shadows. They exchange secret envelopes when the cameras aren't looking. And the coffee lady. She said something about adjusting numbers and a board meeting." Thompson's expression shifted subtly. The mention of Harrison and adjusted numbers connected to his own nagging concerns about the recent financial reports. "How do you know all this, Lucy?" I live nearby," she said vaguely, avoiding his gaze. "I watch people. My dad used to say I notice things others don't." Her voice trembled slightly at the mention of her father, and she hugged Mr. Snuggles tighter. Before Thompson could respond, a sharp voice cut through the evening air. "Mr. Thompson, your dinner. A reservation is in 30 minutes. Emily Rivera stood at the entrance to the parking lot, her expression stern as she glanced at Lucy. Thompson noticed Lucy flinch at Emily's voice and shrink back slightly. It was a small reaction, but it spoke volumes. He looked at the crumpled papers in Lucy's hand. "May I see your notes?" She handed them over carefully, her childish handwriting filling the pages with dates, times, and observations. Despite the misspellings and uneven lines, a disturbing pattern emerged. Thompson's security training kicked in. The suspicious meetings, the cameras malfunctioning, the timing of document exchanges, it all aligned with corporate espionage tactics he had been warned about. "Lucy, would you like some hot chocolate?" he asked, making a decision. "I think we need to talk more about what you've seen." Emily stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply. "Mr. Thompson, dinner, cancel it," Thompson said firmly. "Something more important has come up." He turned to his security chief. "Charles, please sweep my office for surveillance equipment, thoroughly." Lucy felt a warmth spread through her chest. He was listening, really listening. As they walked toward the building's side entrance, she noticed Harrison watching them. From a window above, his face dark with anger. She instinctively moved closer to Thompson. Inside Thompson's office, Lucy sat in an oversized leather armchair with a cup of hot chocolate warming her hands. She recounted everything she had observed over the past few weeks, from small exchanges of conversations to behavioral patterns. Thompson listened intently, asking precise questions that helped piece together a troubling puzzle. "Your teddy bear looks well loved," he said during a pause in their conversation, noticing she hadn't let go of it even once. Lucy ran her fingers over Mr. Pelson's patched arm. "Mum fixed him the last night I saw them. She said he would protect me when I was scared." She didn't elaborate on what happened after that night, but Thompson's kind eyes filled with understanding. As Lucy spoke, Thompson's assistant quietly entered with dinner for both of them, real food that made Lucy's eyes widen. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. Between careful bites, she continued to share her observations, unaware that her detailed account was helping Thompson confirm suspicions he had barely acknowledged to himself. "There's something else," Lucy said, reaching into Mr. Pelson's, stuffing through a small hole. She pulled out a folded piece of paper she had found in a trash bin. "I can't read all the words, but the numbers don't match what I heard them talking about." Thompson unfolded the document, and his expression turned serious. It was a draft of a financial report, but the numbers differed significantly from the final version he had reviewed earlier that day. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just corporate espionage, it was full-scale fraud. As evening fell outside the tall windows of the glass sphere, Thompson made another decision that would change several lives. He couldn't send this brave, observant child back to the streets, not when she had risked so much to help him, and certainly not when she had shown such remarkable integrity and intelligence. "Lucy," he said gently, "where are you staying right now?" She looked down at her worn-out shoes and hugged Mr. Pelson tighter. "Different places. Mr. Pelson and I are good at finding safe spots." Thompson felt his heart tighten. "How would you and Mr. Pelson like a real bed tonight? And maybe we could talk about making it a more permanent solution tomorrow?" The next morning, Lucy woke up in a bed so soft it felt like floating on clouds. For a moment, panic-stricken, she didn't recognize her surroundings. Then she remembered the kind security guard Charles had driven her and Thompson to a luxury hotel. Thompson had insisted on booking adjoining rooms to ensure Lucy felt both safe and supervised. "Good morning, Mr. Pelson," she whispered to her teddy bear, who sat proudly on a mountain of pillows. "Can you believe where we are?" The bear's single-button eye caught the morning light and sparkled, as if sharing her amazement. A gentle knock on the adjoining door preceded Thompson's voice. "Lucy, are you awake? Breakfast is here." Over pancakes and fresh orange juice, luxuries Lucy had almost forgotten existed, Thompson explained his plan. "I've arranged for a trusted friend, Dr. Emily Rivera, to meet with you today. She's a child protection specialist who can help us make everything official and legal." Lucy paused mid-bite and a shadow of fear crossed her face. "You're not sending me away, are you?" "No, Lucy," Thompson assured her quickly. "On the contrary, if you're willing, I'd like to become your legal guardian. But we have to do this the right way, with all the proper paperwork and approvals." Before Lucy could respond, Thompson's phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. "Harrison has called an emergency meeting. He's moving faster than I expected." He looked thoughtfully at Lucy. "Would it be okay for you to stay here with Dr. Rivera while I handle this?" Lucy nodded, but her eyes were anxious. "Be careful. The coffee lady, Emily, she's watching everything you do." "I will," he promised, gathering his things. "Charles will be right outside your door, and I've made sure the hotel staff knows not to let anyone else up without my explicit approval." At the office, Thompson found the executive floor buzzing with tension. Emily Rivera intercepted him before he could reach his office. "Eric, there are rumors that you're hiding a homeless child. The board is concerned about potential liability issues." "Are they?" Thompson's voice was cold. "Or is Harrison worried about what that child might have seen?" Emily's perfectly composed face showed a flicker of uncertainty. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, but as the head of communications, I should remind you that any scandal right now could affect the upcoming board meeting." "Thank you for your concern, Emily," Thompson replied, stepping past her. "I'll keep that in mind." In his office, Thompson began executing the plan he had developed overnight. First, he called his old friend from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and shared his suspicions and the evidence Lucy had helped him gather. Then, he contacted his personal attorney and initiated the process to become Lucy's legal guardian. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Lucy was surprised by how quickly she took to Dr. Rivera. The woman had kind eyes just like Thompson, and she didn't talk down to Lucy or treat her like a helpless child. "You're quite extraordinary, you know that," Dr. Rivera said as they worked on a puzzle together. "Not many adults would have noticed what you did, let alone had the courage to say something." Lucy carefully placed another puzzle piece. "My dad always said that seeing isn't enough. You have to do something about it. He was a detective before." She trailed off, focusing intently on the puzzle. Dr. Rivera gently steered the conversation toward lighter topics, but she took careful notes about Lucy's intelligence, observational skills, and the emotional wisdom that often comes from facing life's hardest challenges too early. At Thompson Corp, the emergency meeting reached its climax. Harrison stood at the head of the conference table, presenting charts and figures that painted a grim picture of the company's direction under Thompson's leadership. As you can see, Harrison concluded smoothly, these trends clearly indicate the need for immediate change in leadership. I propose we hold an emergency board meeting next week instead of waiting for the scheduled one. Thompson stood silently, letting his gaze drift from face to face around the table. Many avoided his eyes. Before we proceed with that vote, he said calmly, I have some interesting documents to share. He opened his briefcase and pulled out copies of the evidence Lucy had helped him gather, including the discarded financial report she had saved. I find it fascinating how numbers can tell such different stories, depending on who's telling them. Harrison's face remained composed, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the back of his chair. Where did you get those documents? Let's just say, Thompson replied, that sometimes the most honest eyes are the ones we overlook. He pressed a button on his phone. You can come in now. The conference room doors opened, and a team of FBI agents led by Thompson's friend from the Financial Crimes Division entered. Mr. Harrison, announced the lead agent, we would like to ask you a few questions regarding certain offshore transactions. As Harrison was led away, Thompson noticed Emily Rivera slipping out of the room. She wouldn't get far. Another team of agents was waiting in the lobby. The carefully constructed conspiracy was beginning to unravel, thread by thread, all because a little girl with a teddy bear had dared to speak up. The news of Harrison's arrest spread through Thompson Corp like wildfire. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering about the FBI agents who had taken several top executives away. The glass sphere, usually a model of corporate efficiency, had turned into a hub of speculation and uncertainty. Lucy watched the chaos from Thompson's office, where she sat cross-legged on the leather sofa with Mr. Whiskers in her lap. Dr. Rivera had accompanied her to the office after Thompson called and said he needed them both there for an important meeting. Your father would be proud of you, Dr. Rivera said softly, noticing how Lucy's eyes followed every movement in the lobby below. You have his detective instincts. Lucy hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. Sometimes I forget what he looked like, she admitted quietly, but I remember how he made me feel safe, just like Mr. Thompson does. The office door opened, and Thompson entered along with Charles, his head of security, and a distinguished woman in judicial robes. Lucy, Thompson smiled warmly, I'd like you to meet Judge Harrison. She's here to help us with something very important. Judge Harrison sat down beside Lucy, her formal demeanor softening as she noticed the beloved teddy bear. That's a very special friend you have there, she said, nodding toward Mr. Whiskers. He's my protector, Lucy replied seriously. My mum fixed his arm and said he would always keep me safe. And has he? The judge asked gently. Lucy nodded. He helped me be brave when I had to tell Mr. Thompson about the bad people. And he keeps memories of my parents safe when I start to forget them. Judge Harrison exchanged a meaningful look with Thompson and Dr. Rivera. The psychological evaluation and background checks had been expedited thanks to the judge's understanding of the unique circumstances. Now, she pulled out several important-looking documents. Lucy, the judge began, Mr. Thompson has requested permission to become your legal guardian. Do you understand what that means? Before Lucy could answer, a commotion erupted outside the office. Emily Rivera, who had managed to evade the FBI for a brief moment, stormed through the door, her usual elegance completely gone. You can't do this, she screamed at Thompson. Everything we did was for the good of the company. That street kid has ruined everything we've worked for. Charles quickly moved to restrain Emily, but not before she had knocked over a stack of documents, sending papers flying everywhere. Lucy instinctively ducked behind the sofa, clutching Mr. Whiskers tightly. Get her out of here, Thompson ordered, his voice cold with anger. As Charles led Emily away, Thompson knelt beside the sofa where Lucy was hiding. It's okay, Lucy, you're safe here, no one will hurt you. Lucy peeked out, her eyes wide but determined. She's wrong, isn't she? About me ruining things? Absolutely wrong, Thompson assured her. You saved this company, Lucy. You saved many people's jobs and their futures. Emily and Harrison were the ones who tried to destroy everything. Judge Harrison, who had witnessed the entire scene with remarkable composure, spoke up. I believe this incident only confirms what I have read in Dr. Rivera's reports. Lucy needs stability and protection, and it is clear that Mr. Thompson is committed to providing both. The judge pulled out his pen and began signing documents. Lucy, would you like Mr. Thompson to become your legal guardian, to give you a real home? Lucy looked at Thompson, then at Dr. Rivera, who gave her an encouraging nod. Finally, she glanced at Mr. Whiskers, as if consulting her oldest friend. Yes, she said firmly. But can Mr. Whiskers stay too? Mr. Whiskers will always have a place of honor, promised Thompson, his voice thick with emotion. We'll make sure he gets the best spot in your new room. As Judge Harrison completed the paperwork, Thompson's assistant came in with an urgent message. The board had called for a new emergency meeting, this time to discuss the company's future in the wake of the scandal. Thompson looked torn. He didn't want to leave Lucy after everything that had just happened. Go, said Lucy, surprising everyone with her maturity. Dr. Rivera and Mr. Whiskers will stay with me, and Charles is outside. We'll be fine. Thompson squeezed her hand gratefully. I won't be gone long, then we can go home, our home, and start planning your room, any color you want. As Thompson headed to the board meeting, Lucy settled on the couch with Dr. Rivera, who had pulled out a book to read together. Through the office windows, they could see the city stretching out before them, the same streets where Lucy had once struggled to survive and which now offered a completely different view of her future. Mr. Whiskers, she whispered as Dr. Rivera stepped away to take a call. I think Mum and Dad sent us Mr. Thompson. They're still protecting us, just like they promised. The boardroom felt different now. The heavy oak table that had witnessed countless power plays and secret deals somehow seemed smaller, less intimidating. Thompson sat at its head, facing the remaining board members, those who had not been involved in Harrison's scheme. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, the events of the past few days have revealed serious vulnerabilities in our corporate structure, but they have also shown us something remarkable about human nature and the power of simple honesty. He opened a folder containing Lucy's original notes, the childish handwriting now protected in plastic sleeves. A 7-year-old girl, with nothing but her intelligence and integrity, managed to see what our sophisticated security systems and corporate protocols completely missed. Mr. Thompson, interrupted Bernard Wells, one of the older board members, while we appreciate the role this child played in exposing the fraud, there are concerns about your decision to become her guardian. The publicity, Thompson interrupted firmly, will show that Thompson Corp values integrity above all else, that we reward ethical behavior regardless of its origin, and that we understand our responsibility to the society that supports us. He stood and walked to the windows overlooking the city. I propose a complete restructuring of our corporate governance. First, we will establish an ethics committee that includes representatives from all levels of the company, not just the executive team. The board members shifted uncomfortably as Thompson continued. Second, we will create the Thompson Foundation for children in crisis. We will offer education, housing, and support to children who, just like Lucy, have found themselves alone without having done anything wrong. It is a significant financial investment, pointed out another board member. Yes, it is, agreed Thompson, and this is just the beginning. The foundation will be funded with 20% of my personal shares in the company. I have already discussed the arrangements with our legal department. He turned back to the board with a determined look. What happened here, the fraud, the conspiracy, emerged from a culture that valued profit over people. I am just as guilty as anyone else for allowing that culture to develop. Lucy showed me that we must change, not just our policies, but our fundamental approach to business. Up in Thompson's office, Lucy was teaching Dr. Rivera the secret handshake she had created with Mr. Whiskers when Charles came in with an update. The FBI had found evidence linking Emily and Harrison to similar frauds at other companies. Their network was larger than anyone had imagined. Lucy, Dr. Rivera said thoughtfully, how did you first notice something was wrong? What made you pay attention to Harrison and Emily? Lucy pondered the question while adjusting Mr. Whiskers' bow tie. They smiled wrong, she finally said, like the men who used to sell fake watches on the street. Their mouths smiled, but their eyes were angry. Dr. Rivera wrote something down in her ever-present notebook. Lucy's emotional intelligence was extraordinary, shaped by experiences no child should have to endure, yet untainted by bitterness. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office as Thompson finally returned from the board meeting. His tie was loose, but his eyes shone with triumph. "Ready to go home?" he asked Lucy, who was half asleep on the couch with Mr. Whiskers under her arm. "Our home?" she asked sleepily, still needing reassurance. "Our home," Thompson confirmed, gently lifting her and Mr. Whiskers. "And tomorrow we'll shop for everything you need for your new room." As they rode the elevator down to the parking garage, Lucy noticed something different about the glass sphere. The building seemed somehow warmer, more welcoming. Or maybe it was just because she now saw it from the inside, as part of its family, instead of as an observer on its outskirts. "Mr. Thompson," she suddenly said, remembering something that had been nagging at her, "what happens to the other children? The ones I used to see on the street?" Thompson smiled, his heart swelling with pride at her concern for others amid her own dramatic life changes. "That's exactly why we're starting the foundation, Lucy. You're going to help us find them and help them just like you helped me." In the parking garage, Charles was waiting with the car. As they drove through the city streets, Lucy watched as her old world transformed into something new. The shadows between buildings that had once been hiding spots now looked like galleries waiting to be filled with light. The corners where she had crouched with Mr. Whiskers in the rain would soon offer shelter to others like her. "Look, Mr. Whiskers," she whispered to her teddy bear as they turned into an elegant residential area. "We're finally going home." Thompson's mansion was everything a fairy tale could promise, with its grand staircase and gleaming wooden floors. But for Lucy, the most breathtaking sight was the simple nameplate on her bedroom door. Lucy's room. She ran her fingers over the engraved letters and could still hardly believe this was real. "What do you think, Mr. Whiskers?" she asked, opening the door to show the room she and Thompson had spent the weekend decorating. The walls were a soft sky blue, her choice, and twinkling fairy lights created a starry sky across the ceiling. But the most special feature was the window seat, complete with cushions and a small bookshelf, offering a perfect view out into the world. Mrs. Harrison, the kind housekeeper that Thompson had hired specifically to help Lucy adjust, gently knocked on the open door. "Time to get ready for your first day of school, dear. Mr. Thompson is waiting downstairs with breakfast." School. The word made butterflies dance in Lucy's stomach. She hadn't been in a classroom since that night, when her parents... She hugged Mr. Furr tighter and forced the memory away. Down at the breakfast table, Thompson was going through some documents, but he immediately set them aside when Lucy appeared. "There's my girl, ready for the big day." Lucy nodded bravely, though her grip on Mr. Furr betrayed her nervousness. Thompson noticed it. He always noticed when she was anxious now. "You know," he said casually, as he served her a stack of pancakes, shaped like teddy bears. "I thought Mr. Furr might like to come to school with you today, in your backpack, of course, just until you get used to it." Lucy's eyes lit up. "Really? You don't think the other kids will find it silly?" "Anyone who matters will understand that even the bravest explorers need a reliable companion," Thompson assured her. "Besides, Mr. Furr has proven to be an excellent judge of character." As they drove to the prestigious Riverdale school, Lucy thought about how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. The streets she once wandered were now passing by through tinted car windows. The cafes where she used to search for leftovers would now be replaced by proper school lunches. It felt like a dream, but the familiar presence of Mr. Furr in her new backpack reminded her that it was real. At the school gate, Thompson bent down to adjust her uniform tie. "Remember what we talked about? Dr. Rivera says it's okay to take it slow. If you need me at any time, Mrs. Rivera will call me right away." Mrs. Rivera was the school counselor, carefully chosen by Dr. Rivera to help Lucy adjust. She was waiting at the entrance with a warm smile that reminded Lucy of her mom. "There are a few things you should know," Lucy heard Thompson say quietly to Mrs. Rivera. "She sometimes has nightmares about the accident. And certain sounds like screeching tires can trigger anxiety. Lucy pretended not to hear and instead focused on observing her new surroundings. The schoolyard was full of children in identical uniforms, but her trained eye caught the subtle differences. Worn-out shoes here, an inherited blazer there. Her old habit of noticing details wouldn't disappear just because she now wore a fresh new uniform. The morning passed in a blur of introductions and new routines. Lucy's teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, had been informed of her situation and showed remarkable patience. During math class, Lucy surprised everyone by solving complex problems in her head, a skill she had developed by counting loose coins and calculating food prices on the street. At lunch, she sat alone at first with Mr. Furr in her lap under the table. But then a girl named Sophia sat down next to her, with worn-out shoes that spoke of a family trying to keep up appearances. "I like your sandwich," Sophia said shyly. "Want to trade half?" Lucy remembered countless meals she had shared with other street kids, how shared food could create instant bonds. She carefully divided her sandwich in half, just as she used to divide found treasures with those who had it even worse than herself. In art class, the assignment was to draw their families. Lucy stared at the blank paper with memories swirling in her head. She could draw her parents, preserved in her fading memories, or Thompson, her new guardian. After a moment of thought, she began to draw them all, including Mr. Furr in a place of honor. "That's a lovely drawing," Mrs. Reynolds said softly, stopping by Lucy's desk. "Family comes in many forms, doesn't it?" Back in Thompson's office after school, Lucy curled up in her usual spot on the leather couch, her homework scattered around her. The glass sphere felt different now, no longer just a place to observe from the outside, but a second home. Thompson was in a video meeting, discussing the Foundation's new initiatives, when Lucy noticed something strange. A maintenance worker was taking an unusually long time to change a light bulb, and his uniform didn't quite fit right. Her old instincts stirred to life. She watched as the man casually walked past Thompson's open office door, his gaze quickly darting toward the computer screens inside. Lucy remembered Harrison's angry face as he was taken away, and his warning that "this isn't over," echoing in her head. Some habits, she realized, shouldn't be forgotten. Even in her new life, her ability to notice what others missed could still be necessary. She pulled out her notebook, a real one now, not scraps of found paper, and began taking notes just like before. Mr. Pissling looked down approvingly from his perch on her backpack, his single eye seeming to glimmer with remembered wisdom. Over the next few days, Lucy noticed more suspicious activities that only her watchful eyes seemed to catch. The fake maintenance worker appeared twice more, each time lingering near the executive offices. New faces began showing up in the building, all with temporary contractor badges, all too aware of the security cameras' locations. "Something's not right, Mr. Pissling," Lucy whispered during her homework time in Thompson's office after school. She had started keeping a detailed log in her notebook, just as her father had taught her about police work. "They're planning something, but it's different this time." Thompson was working late again, busy with the company's restructuring and the Foundation's launch. Lucy hadn't told him about her observations yet. She needed to be sure, needed more evidence. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. A good detective gathers all the facts before drawing conclusions. Sophia, her new friend from school, had started joining her during these afternoons. Her mum worked in Thompson Corp's accounting department and couldn't afford after-school care. Today, Sophia was sprawled on the carpet next to Lucy, working on their math assignments. "Your dad's company is so cool," Sophia said, looking around the executive office with wide eyes. "My mom says he's changing everything, making it better for everyone." Lucy smiled at the words, "your dad." She wasn't quite used to thinking of Thompson that way yet, but it felt right somehow. "He's trying to help people," she replied, thinking of the Foundation's plans she'd seen on his desk. "Just like he helped me." A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Charles, the head of security, came in with a concerned look. "Lucy, can I talk to you for a moment?" Sophia gathered her books and promised to meet Lucy at school the next day. When she was gone, Charles sat down next to Lucy on the couch. "I've noticed you've been keeping an eye on the new maintenance staff," he said carefully. "And I saw you taking notes, just like before." Lucy hesitated, clutching Mr. Peasling tightly. "Do you think I'm being silly?" "No," Charles replied firmly. "I think you're observant. And after what happened with Harrison, I've learned to take your observations. Seriously, tell me what you've noticed." Lucy pulled out her notebook and flipped to her detailed notes. She had sketched rough outlines of the suspicious workers, noted times and locations, and even included details about their movements that seemed odd to her street-smart eyes. "Their shoes," she explained, pointing to her notes. "Real maintenance. Workers wear heavy work boots. These men have soft shoes like the ones Harrison's friends used to wear, and they're too interested in the computers and cameras." Charles studied her notes intently, his expression growing more serious. "Lucy, I need to show these to to Mr. Thompson. This could be important." "Do you think Harrison's friends are trying to hurt him again?" asked Lucy, voicing the fear that had grown in her mind. "We won't let them," Charles assured her. "You gave us an early warning just like last time. But Lucy, promise me one thing. Don't investigate on your own. You're not out on the streets anymore. You have people who can help you now." Lucy nodded, but her mind was already working. She understood something the adults might not. Sometimes the best way to see what was happening was to be invisible, and she hadn't forgotten how to do that. That evening, as Thompson drove them home, Lucy noticed he was checking the mirrors more carefully than usual. Charles must have already shared her concerns. "Lucy," Thompson finally said, "you know you can tell me anything, right? Even if you think it might worry me." She looked down at Mr. Snuggles and gathered her courage. "I think the bad people aren't done," she said quietly. "They're trying to find a way to come back. I see them watching, planning." Thompson's hands tightened on the wheel. "Are you sure?" "I learned to see things others don't when I was on the streets," she explained. "It kept me safe, and now I want to keep you safe too." They turned into the driveway of the mansion, where additional security guards had been stationed, another sign that her warnings were being taken seriously. Thompson helped her out of the car and then bent down to her level. "Lucy, you've already saved this company once. You don't need to carry that responsibility anymore. Let the adults handle this." But Lucy knew, with the deep wisdom of a child who had seen too much, that adults sometimes missed the most obvious things. As they walked into the house, she hugged Mr. Snuggles tightly and made a silent promise. She would keep watch, wait, and protect her new family, just as they protected her. In her room that night, Lucy placed Mr. Snuggles on his special shelf overlooking her bed. "We have to be extra careful now," she whispered to him, "but this time we're not alone. This time, we have help." The blinking lights on her ceiling cast star-shaped shadows on the walls, reminding her of nights when she had seen the glass sphere from the streets. She was on the inside now, but some battles weren't over yet. As she drifted off to sleep, Lucy's mind was already forming plans, ways to use her unique skills to protect everything and everyone she had learned to love. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the glass sphere, casting long shadows across the marble floor of the lobby. Lucy sat in her usual spot after school in Thompson's office, but today she wasn't doing homework. Her notebook lay open in front of her, filled with new observations and concerns. "Look here, Mr. Whiskers," she whispered to her loyal companion. 3 fake workers yesterday, all carrying identical blue toolboxes. Real maintenance staff have different tools for different jobs. The company's headquarters had been unusually busy lately. The announcement of the Thompson Foundation had drawn media attention, and preparations were in full swing for a major press conference where Thompson would present his plans for corporate reforms and community engagement. Lucy's new friend, Sophia, was absent from school today, which felt strange. When she called Sophia's mom in the accounting department to check in, she was told that Sophia was home with a cold, but something in Mrs. Rivera's voice had sounded odd, strained. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Charles came in looking more serious than usual. "Lucy, we need to talk." He sat down beside her and glanced at her notebook. "Our security team has followed up on your observations. Those men you saw, they're connected to Harrison's old partners from other companies." Lucy hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. "What do they want?" "We believe they're trying to access our computer systems," Charles explained carefully. "The Foundation's message has made some people nervous. People who have secrets they don't want revealed. Lucy remembered how Harrison had ties to other companies, how Emily had mentioned partners during their secret meetings. They're scared, she realized. Scared of what Mr. Thompson might find when he starts helping other companies improve. Charles nodded, impressed by her insight. Exactly. But don't worry, we've increased security and... He was interrupted by a commotion outside the office. Sophia's mom, Mrs. Rivera, stormed in with tears streaming down her cheeks. Where is... Mr. Thompson? I need to talk to him right now. Charles tried to stop her, but Lucy heard herself say, Mrs. Rivera, is Sophia okay? The woman's expression twisted further. Sophia, they said they would hurt her if I didn't help them. They want me to plant something in the accounting system before the press conference. Something that would make Mr. Thompson look bad. Lucy's heart raced. That was why Sophia wasn't at school. She wasn't sick at all. The bad people were using her to force her mum to help them. Charles immediately pulled out his phone and ordered additional security at the Rivera home. But Lucy was already thinking, her mind working the same way it did when she was on the streets, needing to find safe places or help other homeless children. Mrs. Rivera, she said softly, does Sophia still have the friendship bracelet I made for her? The one with the little tracking device Mr. Thompson built into it. Mrs. Rivera's eyes widened. Yes, she never takes it off. She thinks it's just a pretty bracelet. Charles was already making another call. Thompson had insisted on having tracking devices disguised as jewelry made for Lucy and her new friend, knowing his enemies might try to attack him through the children. Now that paranoid precaution might save Sophia. Lucy pulled out her own bracelet, identical to Sophia's. Mr. Thompson can find her. He'll keep her safe, just like he keeps me safe. As if summoned by her words, Thompson strode into the office, his face tense with worry. He had been in a board meeting when the alert about Sophia came in. Rebecca, he said gently to Mrs. Rivera, we're going to help Sophia. But I need you to tell me everything they asked you to do. Every detail could be important. While the adults talked, Lucy slipped Mr. Whiskers into her backpack and went to her observation spot by the window. The fake maintenance workers were still somewhere in the building, probably waiting for Mrs. Rivera to carry out their plan. But they didn't know what Lucy knew, that sometimes the best way to catch bad people was to let them think they were winning. She opened her notebook to a fresh page and began writing. Years of observing people on the streets had taught her to see patterns, to understand how people moved when they were trying to hide something. Now she would use those skills. Again, not just to protect Thompson, but to save her friend. Mr. Whiskers, she whispered as she wrote, we have to be extra clever this time. The bad people think they're smarter than everyone else, but they don't know us. They don't realize that sometimes the best eyes are the ones they don't even notice. Outside the office, the afternoon sun was setting, casting deeper shadows over the glass sphere. Somewhere in the city, Sophia was waiting to be found. And in Thompson's office, a little girl who had once been invisible was about to prove that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. The tracking system showed Sophia's location at an abandoned office building on the outskirts of the city. Thompson's security team was already on their way, but Lucy knew something they didn't. She recognized the address. I used to hide there sometimes, she told Thompson, pointing to her detailed notes. There's a secret entrance through the old maintenance tunnels. The other street kids showed it to me. That's probably how they brought Sophia in without anyone seeing. Thompson studied her notes intently. Lucy, this is incredibly helpful, but I need you to stay here where it's safe while we... No, Lucy interrupted, surprising even herself with her determination. Sophia is my friend, and I know those tunnels better than anyone. Mr. Whiskers and I can help. Dr. Rivera, who had been called in when the situation escalated, said, She's right, Eric. Lucy's knowledge of the place could be crucial, and having a familiar face might help keep Sophia calm. After an intense discussion, a plan was formed. Charles would lead a team through the main entrance as a distraction, while Thompson and Lucy, along with 2 highly trained security guards, would use the service tunnels to reach Sophia. Remember, Lucy whispered to Mr. Whiskers as they prepared to leave, we have to be extra quiet, just like when we hid from the bad people on the streets. The tunnel entrance was exactly where Lucy remembered it, hidden behind overgrown bushes. As they moved through the dimly lit passages, Lucy led them with confidence, pointing out potential hiding spots and warning about noisy metal grates that could give them away. "There," she whispered, pointing to a beam of light coming through a ventilation grate. "That's the room where we used to sleep sometimes. You can hear everything from there." Sure enough, voices could be heard from above. Lucy recognized one of them immediately. It was the fake maintenance worker who had been keeping an eye on Thompson's office. "The kid's mom better do what we say," the voice said. "Once Thompson's reputation is ruined, it'll be easy to take over the company. No one will trust him to run a foundation for kids when it looks like he's been stealing from his own company." Thompson's grip tightened on Lucy's shoulder. They listened as the men discussed their plan. They had forged documents showing that Thompson had embezzled funds, and they planned to force Mrs. Harrison to plant them in the company's accounting system just before the press conference. Suddenly, Sophia's voice rang out. "My mum won't help you. Mr. Thompson is a good person, and Lucy will figure out what you're up to. That street kid got lucky last time," another voice sneered. "But she won't interfere with our plans again." Lucy felt a wave of protective anger. These were the same kind of people who had hurt her friend on the street, who thought they could bully and threaten their way to what they wanted. But this time she wasn't a helpless child hiding in the shadows. She had help. She tugged on Thompson's sleeve and pointed to another tunnel intersection. "That leads to the room next door," she whispered. "We used it to grab food the office workers left behind." Thompson relayed the information via his radio to Charles's team. Within minutes, a coordinated operation was underway. The security teams stormed both locations simultaneously, completely catching Sophia's kidnappers off guard. In the chaos that followed, Lucy slipped into the room through their hidden entrance and found Sophia crouched in a corner. "It's okay," she said, holding out Mr. Snuggles. "You can hold him. He helps make the scary things go away." Sophia grabbed both the bear and Lucy in a tight hug. "I knew you'd come. When they took me, I remembered how you said you survived on the streets by being smarter than the bad people. So I kept my bracelet and left clues like you taught me." When the security team secured the building and arrested Sophia's kidnappers, Thompson looked at the two girls with pride and amazement. Lucy had not only helped save her friend, but had also taught Sophia some of her survival skills. "Mr. Thompson," Lucy called, still holding Sophia's hand. "Can Sophia and her mom stay with us tonight? She needs a safe place like the one you gave me." Thompson smiled, his heart swelling with Lucy's instinct to help others find the same safety she had found. "Of course they can. And tomorrow we'll show everyone at the press conference that no threats can stop us from doing what's right." As they stepped out of the building into the evening air, Lucy held up Mr. Snuggles against the fading sunlight. "See," she whispered to him, "sometimes the best way to help ourselves is to help others first." The journey back to Thompson's estate was filled with quiet conversations and comforting hugs. Sophia and her mom would be safe now, and those who had tried to harm them would face justice. But even more importantly, Lucy had discovered something powerful. Her past experiences, which had once been solely about survival, could now be used to protect and help others. That night, as the two girls fell asleep in Lucy's room under the twinkling ceiling lights, Mr. Snuggles sat on his special shelf keeping watch. He was now guarding not just one child, but two, and his button eye gleamed with something resembling pride. The morning of the press conference dawned bright and clear, but the mood inside Thompson's estate was tense. Lucy sat at the breakfast table, picking at her scrambled eggs while watching Thompson go over his speech one last time. "You didn't sleep well," she observed, noticing the subtle signs of fatigue around his eyes. Since Sophia's rescue the previous night, the house had been full of activity. Security briefings, legal consultations, and final preparations for the foundation's launch. Thompson looked up from his papers and managed a warm smile. "Nothing gets past you, does it?" He set the speech aside and focused on her. "Are you sure you want to be at the press conference? No one would blame you if you wanted to stay home." "With Mrs. Harrison." Lucy straightened in her chair, unconsciously mimicking Thompson's business-like posture. "Mr. Snuggles and I have to be there. Sophia too. People need to see that helping kids isn't just something you talk about. You actually do it? Her words moved Thompson deeply. In the weeks since he had become her guardian, Lucy had shown an understanding of complex situations that far exceeded her age. Now she was helping him see his own foundation's mission with greater clarity. In the glass sphere, the grand lobby had been transformed into a media center. TV cameras and journalists filled the space where Lucy had once hidden to escape the rain. Sophia and her mum had arrived early, both still shaken but determined to support the cause that had ultimately helped save them. "Lucy," Sophia called, running to hug her friend. "Mum's going to tell everyone about the bad people and how they tried to trick her. She says the truth is the best way to stop them." In Thompson's office, now serving as a preparation room, Charles was conducting the final security briefing. The FBI had linked Sophia's kidnappers to a network of corporate criminals spanning several major companies. Harrison's plans at Thompson Corp had only been part of a larger web of fraud and corruption. "They're desperate now," explained Charles, showing surveillance footage of known accomplices who were still at large. The Foundation's transparency initiative would expose operations they've built up over the years. That's why they tried to discredit you before the announcement. Lucy, sitting in her usual spot on the leather couch, raised her hand as if she were back in school. "But they didn't know about my special way of seeing things, did they? They thought kids wouldn't notice them." "Exactly," agreed Thompson. "They underestimated you, just like Harrison did, and that was their biggest mistake." Dr. Rivera, who had come to support both girls during the press conference, observed Lucy with professional interest. "You've turned your survival skills into a superpower, Lucy. The very things you learned on the streets are now helping to protect others." As the time for the press conference approached, Lucy helped Sophia adjust the new dress Thompson had bought for her. Both girls would sit in the front row, symbolic representatives of the Foundation's mission to protect and empower vulnerable children. "Mr. Whiskers thinks we're very brave," Lucy told Sophia, adjusting her beloved teddy bear's bow tie. "He says sometimes the scariest things we do are the most important." Through the office windows, they could see the crowd growing in the lobby below. Journalists tested their microphones, photographers adjusted their cameras, and security personnel kept a watchful eye on every entrance. "Lucy," Thompson called softly, "can you come here for a moment?" He led her to the window and pointed toward the city skyline. "Do you remember the first time you saw this building?" She nodded, the memory clear in her mind. "I called it the glass sphere. It looked magical, but I was afraid to get too close. And look at you now, you've not only come inside, you've helped make it a better place." He bent down to her level. "I've been thinking about what you said at breakfast. You're right, the Foundation isn't just about talking. It's about action. That's why I want to announce something special today, but I wanted to ask for your permission first." Lucy listened intently as Thompson explained his idea. With each word, her eyes grew wider and a smile spread across her face. Mr. Whiskers, watching from his place in her arms, seemed to share her excitement. "Really?" she asked when he was done. "You want to do that?" "Only if you agree to it," Thompson assured her. "You've shown us all that sometimes the best way to help is to listen to those who've experienced the problems we're trying to solve. Your perspective is invaluable." Lucy impulsively hugged him, something she had recently become comfortable doing. "I think it's perfect. And I believe—" She hesitated, but then continued bravely. "I believe my parents would be proud. They always said helping others was the most important thing we could do." Thompson held her close, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "They would be incredibly proud of you, Lucy, just as I am." A knock on the door signaled that it was time. The press conference was about to begin, marking a new chapter in the history of Thompson Corp. But even more importantly, it would signify a fresh start for countless children who, just like Lucy, only needed someone to notice them, listen to them, and give them a chance to show their true worth. In the lobby of the glass sphere, anticipation buzzed as journalists and photographers jostled for space. Lucy and Sophia sat in the front row, with Mr. Whiskers placed proudly between them. From this angle, Lucy could see every detail of the podium where Thompson would soon speak, and more importantly, she could keep an eye out for any signs of trouble in the audience. Mrs. Parker sat on Sophia's other side, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. The evidence she had provided about the attempted corporate sabotage had helped the FBI make several arrests overnight. Now, she would share her story publicly and help expose the corruption network that had nearly destroyed so many lives. Charles had stationed security personnel at every entrance, their presence discreet but vigilant. Lucy noticed that he had specifically chosen guards she had identified as trustworthy during her days of observation. It made her smile, realizing how much they now valued her judgment. Thompson stepped up to the podium, and his presence immediately commanded attention. Camera flashes sparkled like stars across the lobby's marble surfaces, reminding Lucy of her flickering ceiling lights at home. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson began in a strong, clear voice, "3 months ago, an extraordinary 7-year-old girl showed me that the most valuable insights often come from the most unexpected sources. She taught me that sometimes we must see our world through others' eyes to find the truth." Lucy felt Sophia squeeze her hand supportively as Thompson continued, describing how a child's honesty and courage had not only saved his company, but also inspired a complete re-evaluation of corporate responsibility. The Thompson Foundation for Children in Crisis is more than just a charity, he announced. It represents a fundamental shift in how we see our role in society. We're not just providing resources, we're listening to the people we aim to help. He gestured for Mrs. Parker to come forward, and she stood to share her story. She spoke firmly about the coercion attempt, her fear for Sophia's safety, and how Lucy's friendship and Thompson's protection had given her the courage to stand up to corruption. Then came the moment Lucy had been waiting for. Thompson smiled warmly at her as he prepared to share their surprise announcement. "Today, I am proud to introduce a unique addition to our foundation's leadership team. We are establishing a Children's Council, led by 2 extraordinary young individuals who have already proven their ability to see the truth and inspire change." Lucy and Sophia exchanged excited glances as Thompson explained how the council would ensure the foundation's initiatives truly considered the needs of the children they wanted to help. Lucy would be the first chairperson, with Sophia as her deputy. "These girls will help us identify and support other children in crisis," Thompson continued. "Their experiences and insights will guide our efforts to create real, lasting change." The announcement stirred the journalists. One reporter raised a hand. "Mr. Thompson, isn't Lucy a bit young for such a position?" Thompson smiled. "Age didn't stop her from uncovering corporate fraud, helping to save her friend, and showing us all the power of compassion in action. Sometimes the youngest hearts carry the wisest souls." Lucy stood and gathered her courage. She and Thompson had practiced for this moment, but speaking in front of so many people still made her nervous. Mr. Snuggles, held tightly in her arms, gave her strength. "My parents taught me that everyone deserves a chance to be safe and happy," she said in a clear voice that carried across the silent lobby. "When I lived on the streets, I learned to see things others missed. Now, I want to use that skill to help other children find homes, just like Mr. Thompson helped me." Her simple words touched something deep in the audience. Cameras flashed again, capturing the image of a little girl holding a beloved teddy bear, standing beside the business titan who had become her family. As the press conference continued, Lucy noticed something remarkable. The glass sphere felt different now, not just to her, but to everyone. The sunlight streaming through the windows seemed warmer and more welcoming. This place, once a symbol of corporate power, had transformed into a beacon of hope. Sophia leaned over and whispered, "You did it, Lucy, you really did." But Lucy shook her head slightly. "We did it together. That's what Mr. Plush taught me. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is trust that others will help us." When Thompson concluded his speech and presented ambitious plans for youth centers, educational programs, and support initiatives, Lucy looked out over the gathered audience. She no longer saw just journalists and photographers, but potential allies in their mission to help children in need. The glass sphere had been her observation post, then her sanctuary, and now it would become a place where other lost children could find a home. As applause filled the lobby, Lucy hugged Mr. Plush tightly and whispered, "We're not invisible anymore. Now we help others be seen." A week after the press conference, Lucy stood in front of a newly renovated meeting room at the Glass Sphere. The sign on the door read, "Children's Advisory Council," and below in smaller letters, "Where small voices make big changes." She nervously adjusted Mr. Plush's bow tie. Today, they would have their first official meeting. The meeting room had been entirely designed with children in mind. The imposing leather chairs and dark wooden tables were gone. Instead, comfortable beanbag chairs and colorful cushions created a welcoming circle. The walls were covered with interactive whiteboards at child height, and a small snack station offered healthy treats. "Ready for this?" asked Sophia, as she arrived with a notebook covered in butterfly decals. As vice chair, she had helped Lucy select the first group of council members, children from diverse backgrounds who could offer unique perspectives on the Foundation's initiatives. "I think so," Lucy replied, touching the special badge Thompson had given her. It was designed to look like an ordinary child's accessory, but it granted her access to all parts of the building. "Mr. Plush says we should start by just listening to everyone's stories." The council members began to arrive, each accompanied by a Foundation staff member or guardian. There was Ethan, a 12-year-old who had spent years in foster care before finding his forever family. Grace, 9 years old, who'd escaped an abusive situation with her mom and now helped other children understand their rights. Liam, 10 years old, who had lived in a shelter until the Foundation helped his single dad find work and housing. Each child had been carefully chosen, not just for their experiences, but for their willingness to help others. Lucy had insisted on this criterion, remembering how sharing food and information on the streets had created a support network among homeless children. "Welcome, everyone," Lucy began, her voice stronger than she expected. "I'm Lucy, and this is Mr. Plush. We're here because Mr. Thompson and the Foundation believe that children understand children best." She first shared her own story, not just about exposing corporate fraud, but also about life on the streets, the daily challenges, the constant fear, the importance of looking out for one another. As she spoke, she saw recognition in the other children's eyes. "The Foundation wants to help children like us," she continued, "but they need to know what really helps, not just what adults think helps. That's why we're here." One by one, the other children began sharing their stories. Grace talked about feeling unsafe in her own home and how a teacher finally noticed and helped. Ethan described moving between foster homes and never having a place to call his own. Liam explained how hunger felt different from just being hungry, a deeper, scarier feeling that made it hard to think about anything else. Lucy took careful notes, just as she used to document suspicious activities. But now, instead of tracking threats, she recorded hope, needs, and ideas for change. "At the shelter," Liam said, "they only served food at certain times. If you missed it because of school or your parents' work, you didn't get to eat. Maybe the Foundation could make food available all day." "And safe places to study," Grace added. "Sometimes shelters are too noisy, or you're too scared at home to focus on homework." Sophia drew diagrams on one of the whiteboards, organizing their suggestions into categories: immediate needs, food, safety, housing, long-term support, education, counseling, family stability, and emergency help, crisis hotlines, safe houses, legal aid. Dr. Rivera, sitting quietly in a corner observing, was surprised by how naturally the children collaborated. There was no hierarchy despite Lucy's official position as chair. Every voice was heard and respected. Halfway through the meeting, Thompson peeked in briefly. He stood in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, and watched with pride as Lucy led a discussion about creating emergency backpacks for children who might need to leave unsafe situations quickly. "Each backpack should have a stuffed animal," Lucy said, hugging Mr. Plush. "Sometimes it's the only friend you have, and it helps you be brave when you're scared." The other children nodded understandingly. They knew how comforting a stuffed animal could be, the importance of having something to hold on to when everything else felt uncertain. As the meeting concluded, Lucy felt a warm sense of accomplishment. They had generated pages of practical suggestions, each born from real life. experiences. Even more importantly, she could see how sharing their stories had helped heal some of the pain each child carried. "Mr. Thompson," she called, catching him before he left. "I think we need to have these meetings every week, not just every month. There's so much to do." Thompson smiled, recognizing the same determination that had first led her to warn him about Harrison's plans. "Whatever you need, Lucy. This council is already proving to be more valuable than I could have imagined." After the other children left, Lucy and Sophia stayed behind to organize their notes. The setting sun cast warm shadows through the windows of the glass sphere, reminding Lucy of how far she had come since the days when she stood outside looking in. "Mr. Snuggles," she whispered to her constant companion, "I think we're finally doing what Mom and Dad always wanted, helping others feel safe and happy." The impact of the Children's Advisory Council was immediate and far-reaching. Within weeks, the Foundation had implemented several of their suggestions, starting with the emergency backpack program. Each backpack contained not only essentials, but also a carefully chosen stuffed animal, a detail Lucy had insisted on, knowing how much comfort Mr. Snuggles had given her during her darkest moments. That morning, Lucy sat in Thompson's office, her legs swinging as she reviewed the council's latest proposals. The glass sphere buzzed with energy as preparations were made for the Foundation's first major initiative, a network of 24/7 youth centers across the city. "The first center opens next week," Thompson reminded her, looking up from his computer. "Are you ready for your speech?" Lucy nodded, though she hugged Mr. Snuggles a little tighter. Public speaking was still challenging, but she was learning to channel her nervous energy into determination, just as she had done on the streets when fear threatened to overwhelm her. Sophia burst into the office, waving a newspaper. "Lucy, look at this!" The paper featured an article about the Foundation's impact, with a photo of Lucy and the council members. The headline read, "Children Leading Change, Thompson Corp's Revolutionary Approach." But something in Sophia's expression suggested she had more to share than just the article. Lucy recognized the look. It was the same one Sophia had when she first reported suspicious activities in the accounting department. "What is it?" Lucy asked, her old instincts kicking in. Sophia glanced at Thompson before continuing. "Remember Ethan from the council? His foster brother went missing yesterday. The police say he ran away, but Ethan says something feels off. He says his brother Lucas was excited to start at the new school the Foundation arranged for him." Lucy's mind immediately started working, as it had during her days of observation. "Did Lucas take anything with him? Did he leave a message?" "That's just it," Sophia replied. "He left everything, even his new backpack from the Foundation. Ethan says Lucas loved that backpack. He wouldn't have left it behind." Thompson was already on the phone with Charles, alerting security personnel about the situation. But Lucy began piecing together other details, recalling conversations from recent council meetings. "Lucas mentioned something last week," she said, slowly, "about a man who kept watching him at the bus stop. He said it reminded him of before, when he was with his biological parents." Thompson's expression darkened. He knew Lucas's story. The Foundation had helped place him in foster care, after rescuing him from a dangerous home situation. "If someone from his past had found him, I should have been more attentive," Lucy whispered to Mr. Whiskers, "just like when I noticed the fake maintenance workers." "This isn't your fault, Lucy," Thompson assured her. "But your observational skills might help us find him. What else do you remember from what Charles said?" Lucy closed her eyes and recalled the council meeting. "He said the man had a blue baseball cap with a silver star and was driving a dark van with a dent in the back door. Charles noticed those details because—" She hesitated, then continued, "because I taught him to pay attention to details to stay safe." Thompson and Ethan exchanged glances. A van matching that description had been reported near several schools recently. "There's something else," Sophia added. "Ethan says Charles was very interested in the new youth center. He kept asking about the construction schedule and the security systems." Lucy's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. "The center opens next week. Charles wasn't asking out of curiosity. Someone forced him to gather information." Within minutes, Ethan had his team reviewing security footage from the construction site. Thompson contacted the FBI agents who had worked on Harrison's case, suspecting a possible connection to the remaining members of the corporate fraud network. "Lucy," Thompson said carefully, "I know you want to help find Charles, but I need you to promise me you'll let the professionals handle this. No solo investigations this time." But Lucy had already formed a plan. She wasn't going to investigate alone. She had something much more powerful now. She had the counsel. "Mr. Thompson," she said cautiously, "Charles trusts kids more than adults. That's why they forced him to gather information instead of doing it themselves. Maybe the council members can help in a safe way by sharing information about where they've seen the van or if Charles said anything to them about being worried." Thompson considered her suggestion. Lucy had repeatedly shown that kids sometimes see things adults miss, and she was right. Children who have experienced trauma often trust other kids more than adults. "Okay," he finally said, "but everything goes through Ethan's team first. And you stay in the building and coordinate with the council members remotely." Lucy nodded and was already pulling out her special council phone, a secure device that connected her to other council members. As she began sending messages, she held Mr. Snuggles close. "We'll find him," she whispered to her teddy bear. "Because now we know something the bad guys don't. Sometimes the smallest eyes see the biggest truths." The council room had transformed into a command center. Lucy sat at the heart of a network of information, coordinating reports from council members across the city. Mr. Snuggles watched from his special spot as she handled calls and messages on her secure council phone. "Grace saw the van yesterday," Sophia reported, updating their digital map. "Near the construction site for the new youth center. She said the silver star on the driver's hat looked like a sheriff's badge." Lucy's hand froze over her notebook. A sheriff's badge. She turned to Ethan, who was overseeing their information gathering. "Charles's foster father. Wasn't he a security guard?" Ethan nodded gravely and was already calling his team. Lucy's ability to connect seemingly unrelated details continued to amaze him. The council members had mobilized their own networks, other kids in foster homes, school friends, even the informal community of children still living on the streets. They understood how to gather information without drawing attention, using the invisible networks Lucy had once relied on to survive. Liam's contact at the warehouse saw Lucas, Ethan reported via video call. He wasn't alone. She said he looked scared but pretended not to recognize her. Lucy felt her heart beat faster. Lucas was leaving clues for them, just as she had taught him during their time on the streets. What else did Liam's friend see? The man with Lucas was carrying blueprints. She heard him say something about the youth center's opening ceremony. Thompson entered the room as Lucy pieced the information together. "Lucy, the FBI believes they've identified Lucas's foster father. He used to work for a private security company connected to Harrison's network. He's planning something at the opening ceremony," Lucy realized, her street instincts screaming warnings. That's why they needed Lucas to get information about the security systems. Dr. Rivera, who had been sitting quietly and observing, spoke up. "Lucas is trying to protect others, isn't he? By cooperating but leaving clues." Lucy nodded, remembering how she used to do the same, appearing to cooperate while secretly working against those who meant harm. "He knows we understand his messages. That's why he made sure Liam's friend saw the blueprints." Thompson studied the map they had created, marking every sighting of the van and every location where Lucas had been seen. "The pattern suggests they're based somewhere in this area," he said, circling an industrial zone. "The old shoe factory," Lucy whispered, recognizing the place. "There's a hidden basement. I used to see other kids hiding there when I was on the streets." Sophia squeezed her hand supportively, understanding how difficult it was for Lucy to revisit memories from that time. "Mr. Thompson," Lucy said firmly, "I know you said we should let the professionals handle this, but I know that building, all its secrets, and Lucas knows I understand the signs he's leaving." Thompson crouched beside her chair with a serious expression. "What are you suggesting?" "Let me talk to Lucas's foster parents. They might have missed something, details that only make sense to other kids who've been on the streets. And maybe," she squeezed Mr. Whiskers for courage, "maybe we can use the opening ceremony as a chance to help Lucas." "It's too dangerous," Thompson began, but Lucy interrupted. "Sometimes the safest plan is the one no one expects," she said, repeating words her father had once told her. "The bad people think Lucas is just a scared kid helping them. They don't know about the council, about how we work together." "Doctor," Rivera nodded slowly. "She's right, Eric. These kids have created something remarkable, a support network that operates on a level most adults can't even see." Charles was already adjusting the security plans for the opening ceremony. "If we know they're planning something, we can be prepared. And having Lucy and the council involved might actually make our job easier. No one would suspect kids are part of a security operation." Thompson looked at Lucy and saw not just his adoptive daughter, but the brave, resourceful girl who had saved his company. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks." Lucy turned to her council phone and sent out a series of coded messages that only the council members would understand. Each child had a role to play, using their unique skills and positions to gather information and prepare for what was to come. "Mr. Whiskers," she whispered as the room buzzed with activity, "we will help Lucas the same way you helped me, by being brave when it's scary and by trusting that our friends will help." Outside the glass sphere, the sun set on a new day. Somewhere in the city, Lucas left breadcrumbs for them to follow, trusting the network of children who understood what it meant to be invisible but not powerless. The inauguration ceremony was 4 days away, and Lucy knew every minute counted. The day before the youth center's inauguration ceremony, Lucy sat with Lucas's foster parents in Thompson's office, with Mr. Whiskers attentively in her lap. She had spent hours preparing for this conversation, aware that the right questions could reveal crucial details. "Lucas kept a diary," his foster mother said, pulling out a worn notebook. "We didn't want to invade his privacy, but after he disappeared." Lucy carefully opened the diary. To most adults, it would look like typical teenage notes, but she recognized the subtle markers, specific words and symbols that street kids used to communicate. "Look," she pointed to a recurring drawing in the margin. "This isn't just a star, it's a map." She explained how street kids often used simple drawings to mark safe zones and danger areas. Lucas's foster father leaned forward. "There's a star like that on every page from the last week." Lucy traced the pattern with her finger. "He marked the car's route. Do you see how the stars get closer to the youth center?" She turned to Charles. "He left a trail for us just in case." Thompson watched from his desk, once again amazed by the hidden survival language these children had developed. The FBI agents monitoring the conversation via a secure link were equally impressed. As Lucy decoded more of Lucas's diary, a clear picture emerged. His biological father, Michael Johnson, had been following him for weeks and had gradually gained enough influence to force Lucas to cooperate. But Lucas, with the skills Lucy had taught him, had prepared for this moment. "He knew they would try something during the ceremony," Lucy explained. "That's why he asked so many questions about security, not just to help them, but to help us, stop them." The plan for the ceremony was complex but meticulously designed. The council members would be positioned throughout the audience, each responsible for monitoring specific areas. They would use the secure phones to report anything suspicious, with Charles's team overseeing all communication. "Remember," Lucy told the council during their final briefing, "we're not trying to be heroes. We're just extra eyes and ears. Just like we were on the street." Sophia had designed a brilliant addition to the plan. The Foundation's emergency backpacks would be displayed during the ceremony, and each council member would carry one. "If something happens," she explained, "we'll look just like the other kids receiving backpacks. No one will notice us moving." Grace's contribution was equally clever. She had suggested that a children's choir perform during the ceremony, giving them the perfect excuse to place kids at various heights around the venue, including the balcony where they suspected Johnson would try to access the security control room. The morning of the ceremony arrived bright and clear. Lucy stood in front of her mirror at home, carefully adjusting Mr. Petters's tie. "Today is very important," she said seriously to him. "We're not just helping Lucas, we're showing that kids who have been hurt can become protectors." Thompson appeared in her doorway. "Ready, sweetheart." Lucy nodded and tucked Mr. Peters into her special backpack. "Did you know," she said as they walked to the car, "that sometimes the bravest things look like ordinary things? Like a teddy bear that helps you sleep, or a diary full of drawings that are really messages. Is that what your dad taught you?" asked Thompson cautiously. "Yes," Lucy smiled, remembering. "He said that true courage often wears a disguise." At the youth center, everything was in place. The council members blended seamlessly with the other children arriving for the ceremony. Charles's security team was discreetly positioned, and FBI agents were stationed nearby, all connected through the network that Lucy and her friends had helped design. As she took her seat near the podium where Thompson would speak, Lucy felt a familiar sense of anticipation, the same feeling she used to get when watching the glass sphere from the shadows. But now she wasn't alone. Now she had an entire network of invisible protectors, each ready to help bring Lucas home. "Mr. Peters," she whispered, touching her backpack where he waited patiently, "it's time to be brave again. Lucas needs all of us to be brave." The ceremony was about to begin, and somewhere in the crowd a frightened boy was waiting for the signal that help had arrived. Lucy straightened her shoulders, recalling every lesson the streets had taught her about patience, observation, and the power of working together. The next few hours would put everything the council had learned about turning their past struggles into strength to the test. The youth center's grand hall was buzzing with excitement as guests filled the rows of chairs. TV cameras lined the back wall, ready to broadcast the foundation's significant opening. Lucy watched from her seat near the stage, her council phone hidden in the backpack next to Mr. Peters. Sophia's children's choir had just taken their places on the tiered risers, their matching blue uniforms providing perfect cover for Grace and two other council members to monitor the upper levels. Through her earpiece, Lucy could hear their whispered observations. "Blue van just parked in the north lot," Grace's voice came softly. "Two men got out. One is wearing a silver star cap." Lucy's heart raced, but she maintained her calm exterior, another skill she had learned from her days on the street. She caught Charles's eye and gave a subtle nod. The security team was already moving into position, blending into the crowd just like the council members. Thompson approached the podium, and his presence immediately captured everyone's attention. "Welcome everyone to a new chapter in our city's history," he began. Lucy scanned the crowd as he spoke, searching for Lucas's familiar face among the sea of people. Then she saw him, partially hidden behind a pillar near the emergency exit. Lucas looked thinner than when she had last seen him at the council meeting, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. But when his gaze met Lucy's, she caught a glimpse of his old determination. Through the earpiece, Liam's voice came. "Second man heading toward the security control room. He's carrying something that looks like maintenance tools." Lucy pressed the special button on her council phone, one press for a detected target, two for immediate concern. Charles's team would understand the signal. She noticed Lucas watching, the same man, his hands fumbling with something in his pocket. "Today," Thompson continued his speech, "we celebrate not just a building but a vision born from the wisdom of children who have faced life's greatest challenges. They have taught us that sometimes the most powerful changes come from the smallest voices." Right on cue, Sophia led the children's choir in their first song. The sweet voices filled the hall, providing cover for Grace and her team as they moved on the upper level, tracking the suspicious man's movements. Lucy's phone vibrated. A message from Ethan. Lucas dropped something behind the pillar, a small piece of paper. She watched as Liam casually walked past the pillar, pretending to tie his shoe while picking up the note. Moments later, her phone displayed the message. "Dad has the device. Control room. 10 minutes. Lucy's mind raced. The security control room controlled everything. Doors, cameras, communication. If Lucas's dad gained access, he could lock down the building and trap everyone inside. But why? What was his real plan? The answer came from an unexpected source. Sophia, who was still directing the choir, used their secret hand signals to communicate what she had heard. "Revenge. Thompson. The Foundation exposed my dad's security company." Of course, the private security company tied to Harrison's network. The Foundation's investigations had led to its shutdown, leaving Liam's dad and his colleagues angry and desperate. Lucy caught Liam's gaze again and slowly, deliberately adjusted Mr. Snuggles in her backpack, making him visible. It was their old signal from Happiness Street. "I understand. Help is on the way." Thompson was approaching the crucial point in his speech where he would present the Children's Council. Lucy had 5 minutes before she would need to go on stage, 5 minutes to set the next phase of their plan into motion. She pressed 3 buttons on her council phone, the signal for all members to initiate Protocol Snuggles, named after her beloved teddy bear. Immediately, subtle movements spread through the audience as the council members began shifting to their secondary positions. Grace's voice came through again. "He's at the control room door, starting to pick the lock." Lucy slowly stood up and adjusted her special backpack. Inside, Mr. Snuggles was ready for his most important mission yet. What the bad people didn't know was that every exhibition backpack during the ceremony, including Lucy's, had been modified by Charles's team. They contained something far more valuable than just emergency supplies. "Do you remember what my dad said about courage wearing a disguise?" she whispered to Mr. Snuggles. "It's time to show them what that means." Thompson presented the Foundation's youth program, building up to the council's introduction. The children's choir began their second song, and the melody carried through the hall like a signal. At the back of the room, Charles and his team quietly gathered near the control room. Lucy took her first step toward the stage, aware that the coming moments would demand every lesson she had learned about timing, trust, and turning fear into action. Liam watched, waiting for the perfect moment to help them stop his dad's plan. The future of the Foundation and the safety of everyone in the building rested on a network of children who had learned to turn their deepest wounds into wisdom. As Lucy walked, she felt the weight of Mr. Snuggles in her backpack, carrying not just their hope, but also the key to saving everything they had worked so hard to build. When Lucy reached the stairs to the stage, everything happened at once. Through her earpiece, she heard Grace's urgent whisper, "The control room's been breached. He's inside." At the same time, Liam made his move, slipping away from the pillar toward backstage. Thompson was just introducing the council when the first sign of trouble appeared. The large screens displaying the Foundation's logo flickered ominously. Lucy knew they had moments before Liam's dad would gain full control of the building's systems, but Lucy and her friends were ready. This was what all their planning had prepared them for. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson continued smoothly, "it is an honor to present our Children's Council, led by a remarkable young person who has taught me to see the world through new eyes." As Lucy stepped onto the stage, she gave the final signal. She touched Mr. Snuggles' ear through her backpack. Immediately, every council member reached into their exhibition backpacks and pressed a hidden button. The modified backpacks contained more than just supplies. They housed state-of-the-art jammers, designed by Charles's team to block unauthorized access to the building's systems. In the control room, Liam's dad discovered that his device was suddenly useless. The screens went black and the electronic locks he had tried to activate remained open. What he didn't realize was that his son had done more than just gather information. Liam had helped the council prepare for this very moment. "Now!" Lucy's voice was clear through the council's communication network. The children's choir suddenly shifted formation, revealing FBI agents who had been hidden among the steps. At the same time, Ethan and Emil emerged from the crowd, carrying the evidence they had gathered. Liam's diary full of coded messages and photographs of the van that had been following them. Liam's dad stormed out of the control room, only to be met by Charles and his team. But his face showed no surprise, only bitter amusement. "Do you think this is over?" he shouted. "Harrison's network runs deeper than you think. There are others who—" "No, Dad." Charles's voice cut through the chaos. He stood at the edge of the stage, no longer hiding. "It's over. I won't help you hurt people anymore." He turned to Lucy. "Show them." Lucy pulled Mr. Pelson out of her backpack. But it was no longer just her beloved teddy bear. Hidden in his recently repaired arm was a small recording device, one that had captured every conversation, every plan, every connection Charles's father had revealed while believing his son was under his control. "Charles never really helped." "You," Lucy explained, her voice carrying over the now silent room. "He helped us understand how deep the corruption went. Every time you had him gather information about the foundation, he was actually collecting evidence about your network." The FBI agents moved in, and this time there would be no escape route for the remaining members of Harrison's organization. Charles's meticulous documentation had exposed not only his father's plan, but an entire network of corruption that had survived the first investigation. When the situation was under control, Lucy rushed to Charles and hugged him tightly. "You were so brave," she whispered. "I remembered what you taught me," he replied, his voice trembling slightly. "About being brave even when you're scared, and about leaving clues for the right people to find." Thompson stood at the podium, his face filled with pride as he watched the council members gather around Charles. What had started as a simple inauguration of a youth center had become a powerful demonstration of everything the foundation stood for: children helping children, turning past pain into strength. "Today," Thompson announced to the stunned audience and rolling cameras, "you have witnessed something remarkable. Not just the prevention of a crime, but the triumph of trust, courage, and wisdom that comes from listening to voices we too often ignore." Lucy held Mr. Pelson close as she stood with her friends. The teddy bear had been more than just a comforting presence today. He had been a symbol of how something seemingly small and ordinary could make an extraordinary difference. The children's choir began to sing again, this time a song of celebration. In the audience, Dr. Rivera wiped away tears, understanding better than ever the healing power of giving children the chance to be protectors rather than just victims. As emergency backpacks were handed out to the gathered families, real ones this time, filled with supplies and hope, Lucy saw the foundation's future more clearly than ever. It would be more than just a refuge. It would be a place where children like her, like Charles, like all the council members, could turn their hardest experiences into tools to help others. "Mr. Pelson," she whispered to her faithful companion, "I think this is what Mom and Dad meant by making the world better. Sometimes you have to go through scary things to learn how to protect others from being afraid." In the days following the events at the youth center, the glass sphere transformed into an activity hub like never before. News of how the Children's Council had helped expose the plot spread quickly, leading to an unprecedented wave of support for the Foundation's mission. Lucy sat in the council room, now officially named Pelson Chamber, in honor of her beloved teddy bear's role in the operation. Around her, the walls were covered with new photographs, council members working together, children receiving their emergency backpacks, and most importantly, families being reunited. "The FBI has finished questioning Charles," Sophia announced, as she entered with a new stack of papers. They said his evidence helped them identify 15 more people connected to Harrison's network. Charles himself had become something of a hero among the council members. His foster parents, with support from the foundation, had moved to a new home where he could feel safe. Even more importantly, he had found his true family in the council, among others who understood his journey. "Mr. Whiskers," Lucy whispered to her constant companion as she went through the latest foundation reports, "do you remember when we used to look at this building from the outside? Now we're helping change it from the inside." Thompson appeared in the doorway, his face glowing with excitement. "Lucy, the board has just approved everything. Do you want to share the news with everyone?" Lucy nodded eagerly and pressed the special button that would connect all the council members through their secure phones. When everyone was online, she took a deep breath. "The foundation is expanding," she announced. "We are opening youth centers in 5 more cities, each with its own children's council. And," she paused, squeezing Mr. Whiskers for courage, "we are creating a special school program for children who have gone through tough times, where we can learn regular subjects, but also use our experiences to help others." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. The council members began sharing ideas for the new programs, each building on their unique insights into what children in crisis truly needed. Grace suggested a peer support system where older children could mentor younger ones through difficult transitions. Liam proposed cooking classes at the youth centers, recalling his own days of hunger. Ethan, drawing from his experiences in foster care, designed a program to help children stay connected with siblings even when separated. But the biggest news, Lucy continued, is about our emergency backpack program. She explained how a major clothing company had contacted the foundation after seeing news coverage of the incident at the youth center. They wanted to mass-produce the backpacks, complete with tracking units disguised as teddy bears, and make them available to child protection organizations across the country. Each bear will have a special mark, Lucy added, touching Mr. Whisker's repaired arm, to remind children that being broken doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes it makes you stronger. Dr. Rivera, who had been observing the meeting, marveled at how far these children had come. The traumas they had experienced hadn't disappeared, but they had found a way to transform them into something powerful and positive. Later that afternoon, Lucy worked with Lucas to design the training program for new council members in other cities. They sat in Thompson's office, surrounded by plans and blueprints, while Mr. Whiskers watched from his special spot on the desk. "It's strange," Lucas said as he sketched out ideas. "A few months ago, I thought being strong meant handling everything alone. Now I understand that real strength is knowing when to trust others." Lucy nodded, remembering her own journey from a lone street observer to the leader of a movement. "That's what we need to teach the new councils," she replied. "That their experiences matter, that their pain can become wisdom, and that helping others heal also helps us heal." Thompson, working quietly at his desk, listened to their conversation with pride. The foundation had evolved far beyond his original vision, guided by the very children it was meant to help. Lucy's simple act of warning him about Harrison had sparked a revolution in how companies could interact with their communities. "Lucy," he called softly, "there's something else we should discuss." "The president's office called this morning." Lucy looked up, curious. "The president of what?" "Of the country," Thompson smiled. "They want to award you and the council the National Medal of Merit for your work in protecting children and exposing corruption. But more importantly, they want your help in designing national policies for child protection and empowerment." Lucy's eyes widened. She looked at Mr. Whiskers and remembered all the nights they had spent alone on the streets, dreaming of a warm bed and a family. Now they had not only found a home, but had also helped create homes for others. "Mr. Thompson," she said thoughtfully, "do you think we could bring some children from the streets to the ceremony? Not just council members, but others who might need to see that change is possible?" Thompson's heart swelled with love for his adopted daughter, who never forgot where she came from or stopped trying to help others find their way home. "I think that's a perfect idea, darling. After all, that's what the foundation is really about, showing children that their darkest moments don't define their future." A year after the incident at the youth center, the Glass Sphere hosted a very special celebration. The main lobby, once a daunting space of marble and glass, had been transformed into a magical world of childhood dreams. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, each bearing the name of a city where a new youth center had opened. Lucy stood at the podium, with Mr. Whiskers proudly placed beside her microphone, addressing a room filled with children, parents, business leaders, and government officials. The past year had brought changes beyond anything she could have imagined when she first looked at the building from the street. "When I was homeless," she began in a clear and confident voice, "I thought being invisible was the only way to keep myself safe. But then I learned that real safety comes from being seen, not just by others, but by ourselves, from acknowledging our own strength." In the front row sat Sophia with Lucas and the other original council members. Behind them were representatives from the new councils in other cities, each with the special badges that identified them as part of what the media had dubbed the Echo Network. Children helping other children find their voices and their power. "Today," continued Lucy, "we are not only celebrating the opening of our 10th youth center, but also the graduation of our first class from the Foundation's special education program." She gestured toward a group of teenagers wearing graduation caps and gowns, each with their own teddy bear, a tradition that had started with Mr. Whiskers. Among the graduates was Liam, who had transformed his experiences of hunger into a culinary scholarship. Grace, who had developed a peer support program now used in schools across the country. Ethan, whose work to improve communication within foster homes had already changed policies in 3 states. Thompson stood at the side of the stage, remembering the little girl who had once warned him about corporate fraud. Lucy had grown taller over the past year, but it was her inner growth that truly amazed him. She had retained her extraordinary observational skills while developing remarkable leadership qualities. "The president asked me last month what makes our foundation different," Lucy said, smiling at the memory of their visit to the White House. "I told her it's simple. We don't just help children escape bad situations. We help them turn their experiences into tools for change." And she carefully lifted Mr. Whiskers and showed his repaired arm to the audience. "Just like this bear, we all carry marks from our past. But just like him, we can use these marks to remind ourselves of our strength, our resilience, and our ability to help others." The foundation's impact had extended far beyond its original goals. Business leaders, inspired by Thompson Corp's example, had created similar programs in their own companies. The emergency backpacks, now known as Echo bags, were distributed internationally. Even Harrison, who was serving his sentence, had expressed remorse and offered information to help other companies prevent similar fraud. "But our greatest achievement," Lucy continued, her voice softening with emotion, "isn't in the buildings we've opened or the programs we've started. It's in the whispers we hear every day, children telling other children that they are not alone, that their voices matter, that their pain can become a purpose." Sophia stepped forward to join her at the podium with a special presentation. Together, they unveiled the Foundation's new initiative, the Echo Scholarship, designed to help former street children achieve their dreams while mentoring others. "Because sometimes," Lucy explained, holding Mr. Whiskers close, "the quietest voices carry the most powerful messages. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change not just one life, but many." As the celebration continued, Lucy took a moment to walk to the window where she had once looked at the glass sphere from the outside. The street below looked different, now not because it had changed, but because she had. She was no longer the invisible observer, but a beacon of hope for other children searching for their home. "Mr. Whiskers," she whispered to her faithful friend, "we did it. We turned our scary story into a happy one, and we helped others do the same." The teddy bear sat in her arms, his one eye glinting in the sunlight streaming through the windows of the glass sphere. His repaired arm, like Lucy's past, had become not a mark of damage but a mark of survival, a symbol of the strength that comes from being broken and rebuilt with love. Outside, the city buzzed as usual, but now there were new eyes watching. Children in every corner who knew they had allies, who understood that their experiences, no matter how difficult, could become tools for change. The whispers of hope that had begun with one little girl's courage had become a chorus of transformation, echoing through streets and buildings, carrying the message that every child deserves not just to survive, but to thrive. On a cool autumn morning, Lucy stood in front of her old hiding spot near the glass sphere. The little alcove where she had once sought shelter had been transformed into a beautiful memorial garden with a plaque that read, "Where Hope Begins, Dedicated to the children who find home." Mr. Whiskers sat securely in her arms as she gave a tour to a group of business leaders from around the world, all eager to learn from the Thompson Foundation's success. These tours had become a regular part of her role as the Foundation's youth ambassador. "This is where I first saw Mr. Thompson," she explained, pointing toward the building's entrance. "I hid here and watched people, trying to understand who was safe and who wasn't. I didn't know then that by observing others I was actually preparing myself for something much bigger." Sophia, now her official assistant in the Foundation's youth programs, stood beside her with a tablet, documenting the tour for their international education program. The two girls had become inseparable, their friendship a testament to how a shared purpose can bridge all differences. "The most important thing we've learned," Lucy continued, turning to the executives, "is that every child has a unique way of seeing the world. Instead of trying to change that perspective, we need to understand how it can help make the world better." Inside the glass sphere, The lobby displayed photographs of success stories, children who had found their way from the streets to stability through the Foundation's programs. Each picture was accompanied by a small teddy bear, inspired by Mr. Whiskers, symbolizing the comfort and courage that could be found in unexpected places. When they reached the echo chamber, Lucy stopped to greet Lucas, who was leading a training session for new council members. He had become the Foundation's expert in helping children transition from crisis situations to leadership roles. "Remember," he told his group, "your experiences haven't made you weaker. They've given you insights others might not have. Use those insights to help drive change." The chamber had evolved into a state-of-the-art command center for the Foundation's national network. Interactive maps displayed the locations of all youth centers, while screens showed real-time updates from various council initiatives. Thompson briefly joined the tour, watching proudly as Lucy explained the Foundation's philosophy to the visiting executives. She had grown so much, not just in height but also in confidence and wisdom. Yet she had retained that special ability to see what others missed, to understand the silent signals that troubled children often sent. "Last month," Lucy said, "a council member at our center in Chicago noticed a pattern in how certain children avoided certain streets. Thanks to her observation, we uncovered a human trafficking ring and helped the police rescue 12 children." The executives murmured in admiration and took notes. One of them raised a hand. "But how do you ensure safety?" "After what happened at the youth center inauguration, that incident taught us something valuable," Lucy replied, hugging Mr. Whiskers tighter. "Sometimes the best safety isn't about higher walls or stronger locks. It's about building networks of trust, teaching children that their voices matter, and that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness." She led the group to a special exhibit, where the original emergency backpack from the youth center incident was preserved. Beside it stood a modern Echo pack, equipped with advanced security features, but still retaining its core element, a teddy bear that served as both a comfort object and a safety device. "Every bear has a story," Lucy explained, touching Mr. Whiskers' patched arm. "Just like every child has a story. When we honor those stories, instead of trying to hide them, we create real change." As the tour concluded, Dr. Rivera approached, with news that made Lucy's eyes light up. The Foundation's latest initiative, a program to help children transitioning out of foster care into independent living, had received full funding from the government. "It's happening just as you predicted," Dr. Rivera smiled. "The system is finally starting to listen to the people it's meant to help." Lucy looked around the vibrant lobby of the glass sphere and remembered how it had once seemed like an unattainable fortress. Now it was a beacon of hope, not just for her city but for children around the world. "Mr. Whiskers," she whispered to her loyal companion, "Mom and Dad would be amazed at how many lives we've touched. Their love didn't end when they left us, it just found a new way to help others through us." The evening sun cast golden shadows through the glass sphere's windows as Lucy prepared for one of the Foundation's most important events, the annual Night of Echoes celebration. This year was special, as it marked 5 years since she first warned Thompson about Harrison's plans. In her office, now located next to Thompson's, she carefully adjusted Mr. Whiskers' bow tie. The bear had received some professional restoration, but Lucy had insisted on keeping his patched arm and simple button eye. The marks of their journey together were too precious to erase. "Everything's ready downstairs," Sophia announced, entering with a tablet showing the evening's schedule. "The new council representatives from Europe and Asia have just arrived. They're so excited to meet you." The Foundation's international expansion had exceeded everyone's expectations. What had started as a young girl's brave act had grown into a global movement, with Echo networks active in 23 countries. "Has Lucas finished preparing for the surprise?" Lucy asked, referring to their special presentation for the evening. Sophia nodded enthusiastically. "It's perfect. No one will expect it." The main lobby had been transformed for the celebration. Instead of formal tables and corporate decor, the space was arranged to resemble a child's vision of safety and comfort. Soft lighting, cozy corners, and walls covered with art created by children from youth centers around the world. As the guests began to arrive, Lucy watched from her old observation spot, now transformed into a comfortable window seat. Business leaders mingled with former street children who had become youth advocates. Government officials chatted casually with council members about policy changes. Every person in the room had been touched in some way by the Foundation's work. Thompson found her there as she was taking in the scene. "A penny for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "I was just remembering," replied Lucy, holding Mr. Whiskers close, "how scared I was that first day when I tried to tell you about Harrison. I thought no one would believe a little girl from the street. You taught me the most valuable lesson of my life," Thompson said softly. "That wisdom doesn't depend on age or status. It comes from the heart and from experience." The evening's program began with a series of presentations from council members around the world. Each story echoed Lucy's original journey. Children who had transformed their pain into purpose, their challenges into change. Then came the surprise. Liam took the stage, accompanied by a group of tech experts from Thomson Corp. They unveiled the Foundation's latest initiative, a global early warning system designed by former street children, using their unique understanding of danger signals to identify and prevent the exploitation of children. "We're calling it the Echo Web," Liam explained to the astonished audience. "It combines artificial intelligence with the real-world expertise of children who know what to look for, because sometimes the quietest cries for help are the most urgent." Lucy watched proudly as her friend demonstrated how the system worked. Liam had come so far from the frightened boy they had rescued at the opening of the youth center. Just like her, he had found his strength in helping others. The presentation concluded with a video montage showcasing the Foundation's impact. Over the past 5 years, images flashed across the screens, emergency backpacks being distributed in disaster zones, youth centers opening in new cities, children finding their voices and their power through the council programs. As Lucy prepared to deliver her closing speech, she felt Thompson squeeze her hand supportively. They had become a true family, bound not by blood, but by a shared vision of what the world could become when every child's voice was heard. 5 years ago, she began, with Mr. Whiskers proudly sitting beside the microphone, "I was an invisible girl with a teddy bear, watching this building from the shadows. Today we're all here because that same teddy bear taught us something important, that sometimes the things that seem broken are actually the strongest." She gently touched Mr. Whiskers' patched arm. "Like this stitching my mom did, love. Leaves marks that remind us of who we are and why we keep going. Every child in crisis carries similar marks, but with help and understanding, those marks can become badges of courage instead of scars of pain." The audience listened intently as Lucy described the Foundation's vision for the future. More youth centers, expanded education programs, and a continued commitment to letting children lead the way in designing solutions to their own challenges. Because the real power of the Echo Network, she concluded, doesn't lie in our buildings or programs. It lies in the moment when one child looks at another and says, "I understand, I've been there, and I'm going to help you find your way home." After the celebration of Echo Night, Lucy was drawn to the rooftop garden at the Glass Sphere. This peaceful space, once just a part of the building's sophisticated architecture, had been transformed into a sanctuary for children in the Foundation's programs. Here, among blooming plants and cozy seating areas, young people could find quiet moments for reflection and healing. Tonight, the garden was illuminated by soft lights mimicking the stars, reminding Lucy of the twinkling ceiling in her childhood bedroom. She sat on her favorite bench with Mr. Whiskers in her lap, gazing out over the city that had once been her only home. "I thought I'd find you here," said Sophia, joining her friend. She carried 2 cups of hot chocolate, a tradition they had kept since their early days together. "Amazing turnout tonight. The international delegates want to implement the Echo Web in every major city by next year." Lucy smiled and made room on the bench. "Did you see the little girl from the center in Bangkok? How she explained their peer support program? It reminded me of us when we started." "It's because you showed us all how to turn pain into meaning," added another voice. Lucas approached, followed by Grace, Liam, and Ethan, the original council members who had become more like family than colleagues. They gathered around the bench, each finding their comfortable spot in the garden they had helped design. These moments, when they could be together without the weight of their responsibilities, were precious to them all. "Sometimes I wonder," Lucy said softly, adjusting Mr. Plush's tie, "what my parents would think of all this. Would they be proud of what their little girl has become?" Thompson's voice came from the garden entrance. "They would be more than proud, Lucy, just as I am every day." He joined the group and sat beside his adoptive daughter. "You haven't just helped children find safety, you've helped them find their strength." The night air was cool but pleasant as they shared stories of the Foundation's journey. They reminisced about the Council's early days, the incident at the youth center that had tested their courage, and the countless lives they had touched since then. "Remember when we thought the emergency backpacks were just for carrying supplies?" Liam laughed. "Now they're like a symbol of hope in crisis zones around the world." Grace nodded. "I saw a news report last week about a girl in a conflict zone who used her echo pack to help her entire community reach safety. She said she got the idea from reading about Lucy and Mr. Plush. The story of the little girl who saved a company, with a simple warning, had become almost legendary, inspiring similar acts of bravery around the world. But for Lucy, the most meaningful impact wasn't in the grand gestures or the international recognition. It was in the quiet moments when one child helped another find their voice. "The Foundation's work isn't just about rescuing children from bad situations," she explained, hugging Mr. Plush tightly. "It's about teaching them that their experiences, no matter how difficult, give them unique insights that can help others. Every child who has gone through darkness knows exactly what light another child needs to find their way out." As they spoke, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Lucy made a wish, just as she used to do on the streets. But this time, her wish wasn't for herself. It was for all the children still waiting to be found, heard, and helped. "You know what's truly amazing," Sophia said, looking at her best friend. "How one small, brave act can create such big changes. You just wanted to help, Thompson, but look at what it started." Lucy looked around at her chosen family: Thompson, who had given her a home and believed in her vision; Sophia, whose friendship had shown her the power of trust; Lucas, who had turned his own rescue into a mission to help others; and all the council members who had become partners in creating change. "That's the Foundation's real legacy," she replied, thoughtfully touching Mr. Plush's patched arm. "Teaching children that they don't have to wait for adults to fix everything. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest voices." In the distance, the glass sphere's windows glimmered in the moonlight, no longer a symbol of corporate power but a beacon of hope for children around the world. Within its walls, the next generation of young leaders was already growing, learning that their past hardships could become tools for building a better future. The next morning dawned bright and clear, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the Foundation's history. Lucy arrived early at the glass sphere, wanting a moment of calm before the day began. As she stood in the lobby, she held up Mr. Plush to see their reflection in the polished marble walls. "Look how far we've come," she whispered to her faithful companion. The teddy bear's one button eye seemed to sparkle in response, his patched arm a testament to their shared journey from the streets to this moment. Today was special. The Foundation was launching its most ambitious program yet. Inspired by Lucy's story, they had created a worldwide network of safe spaces called ECHO, havens where children in crisis could receive immediate help and support, no questions asked. As she walked through the building, Lucy passed the photo wall that had become known as the Gallery of Hope. Each picture told a story of transformation: Grace teaching self-defense to young girls in shelters, Liam holding cooking classes for homeless youth, Ethan mentoring children in foster care, Lucas leading international training sessions for new council members. Sophia met her in the whisper room, as always with her tablet in hand. "The first Echo Haven opens in an hour. Are you ready?" Lucy nodded and touched the special heart she wore, a gift from Thompson on the anniversary of her adoption. Inside was a small photograph of her parents, along with a picture of her new family: Thompson, Sophia, and all the council members who had become her siblings in spirit. "You know," said Sophia softly, "sometimes I think about that rainy day when you first saw this building, how different everything would be if you hadn't been brave enough to speak up." "That wasn't just bravery," replied Lucy, adjusting Mr. Plush's tie. "It was the knowledge that helping others is more important than being afraid. My parents taught me that before they left me, and every child we help teaches me that again." The ceremony to open the first Echo Haven was simple, yet powerful. Instead of speeches from dignitaries, children from the Foundation's programs shared their stories. Each one held their own teddy bear, a tradition that had spread from Mr. Plush and become a symbol of comfort and courage around the world. Thompson stood beside Lucy as they cut the ribbon together. "You've created something extraordinary," he said proudly. "Not just a foundation or a network, but a movement that will outlive us all." Lucy looked out over the gathered crowd, board members from around the world, children who had found their way from darkness to light, business leaders who had learned to look beyond profit margins to human potential. Every face represented a thread in the tapestry of change she had helped weave. "Mr. Plush," she whispered to her beloved teddy bear, "I think this is what Mom meant when she said you would protect me. You didn't just keep me safe, you helped me learn how to keep others safe too." As the ceremony ended, a little girl approached Lucy. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, the same age Lucy had been when she first saw the glass sphere from the street. The girl clutched a worn teddy bear, its fur matted but loved. "Is it true," the girl asked shyly, "that you lived on the street too? That you were scared but still helped people?" Lucy crouched down to the girl's level, just as Thompson had done for her years ago. "Yes," she smiled, introducing Mr. Plush to the girl's bear. "And do you know what I learned? That being scared doesn't mean you're not strong. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who feel afraid but keep going anyway." The girl's eyes lit up with understanding. In that moment, Lucy saw herself, reflected in those eyes, the same hope, the same potential for transformation that had led her from the shadows of the glass sphere to its heart. Later, as the sun set on this meaningful day, Lucy returned to her old vantage point outside the building. But this time she wasn't alone. Thompson, Sophia, Liam, and all her friends from the board joined her, each carrying their own teddy bear. "Every story matters," Lucy said, looking up at the glass sphere as it sparkled in the twilight. "Every whisper deserves to be heard. And sometimes the smallest voice can start the biggest changes." Mr. Plush sat proudly in her arms, his patched-up arm and single-button eye bearing witness to a journey that had transformed not just one little girl's life, but countless lives around the world. In his simple, steadfast presence was the truth that had started it all, that love, courage, and the will to help others could turn any darkness into light. And somewhere in the city, another child found their voice, ready to add their whisper to the chorus of change that would echo through generations. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lucy held Mr. Plush close and made one final wish, not for herself, but for all the children who would follow in her footsteps, turning their own stories of survival into songs of hope for others to follow. The glass sphere stood proudly against the night sky, no longer just a building but a symbol of what was possible when people chose to listen to the whispers of those who needed to be heard most. And in its shimmering windows, countless reflections told the story of a little girl who dared to speak up, and in doing so, taught the world to listen.